Hello, my name is Fred Blackburn, and I've been teaching at San Diego Christian College for almost 25 years now. I teach mostly in the philosophy and religious areas, but this class is very interesting because even though it is a science class, we'll be looking at some worldview pieces and how that affects the interpretation of data. So welcome to Scientific Models of Origin. And the way I like to teach this class, it's almost like a prize fight where I pit creation, or especially a young Earth creationist model versus a Darwinian evolutionary model. But we're going to do this not in a religious or philosophical context so much as in a scientific context. We offer another class at the school called Philosophy of Origins, where we look more at the worldview pieces and how that affects the way we look at data. And I'll mention that in this class, but this class is mostly going to be focused on using the scientific method, what science is, and how it works. And this is how we start week one of the class. The first thing I ask you to do is to look up several definitions of science. And what I think you'll find interesting is, depending on how old the dictionary or encyclopedia is that you look, you'll see the definitions of science changing over time. In the first video I'm going to have you watch this week, Dr. Eugenie Scott of the National Academy of Sciences, she defines science as the study of natural phenomena, or things you can observe with the senses through natural processes. In other words, it's limited to things that you can taste, touch, smell, feel, and hear, and this is the venue in which we know things. There's also a component of using reason and logic, but science itself is dealing with the natural world and looking for natural explanations for why things occur. And so this is an interesting definition, because if you look at other people or older people like Newton or Francis Bacon and these other more ancient scientists, you'll find that their view of science had much more to do about thinking the thoughts of God after him, or trying to understand the universe in terms of why did God make it certain ways. So both groups are starting with presuppositions right off the bat. With Newton and Francis Bacon, they're starting with a theistic presupposition, with this idea that there is a God and he made the world and he made us in a way that we could understand it. And this is very similar to how you'll see people like scientific creationism. They believe that God made a world of order and purpose, and being made in the image of God, we can use our reason given to us by God to understand maybe not the world in its entirety, but many different aspects of the world. Now, this is very different from a secular humanist or a Darwinian evolutionist approach, and they're basing their presupposition on a naturalistic or a materialistic worldview. And what I mean by that is they believe only the physical material world exists. In other words, all that matters is matter. So as far as they're concerned, there is no supernatural or extra physical explanation for things. So they are focused strictly on looking at natural processes or natural phenomena and looking for a natural explanation of them. Whereas a scientific creationist or theistic scientist might have room in their investigation to include a supernatural element. And so that's the first point of contention I want you to see, how even your worldview is going to affect your very definition of science. The next major thing we're going to talk about week one is the scientific method. And the scientific method, in a nutshell, it's you observe the physical natural world. Based on your observations, you come up with a hypothesis of why things may work a certain way. You test that hypothesis, and then if those tests confirm your hypothesis, you can strengthen that to a theory. If your tests refute your hypothesis, you go back and form a new hypothesis. This you continue until you have a strong theory, and then a theory that is 100% repeatable and accurate. That is what we would call a scientific law. Now, Theoretically, there are no laws because we don't know what will happen tomorrow, but some theories are very strong and some are very weak or go back into the hypothesis pile if new testing or information refutes them. So that's what we're going to be doing week 1. Another aspect of science, besides the scientific method, is inference. And this is where we take, when we observe the world, maybe we can't test the process, but we infer from other things we know about the world, like cause and effect, maybe the way layers are deposited. We would assume by the way we know things in the world that lower layers are older than higher layers, like in strata. But this is called inference because no one was there to observe using the scientific method how the strata was laid down. So scientific method and inference will play a huge role in this course. But what you'll see with the study of origins is we can't use the scientific method because we can't observe it. So this really becomes a matter of inference. The problem with inference is it is largely governed by your presupposition. So if you have a materialist worldview, you are going to infer very different things from someone who has a theistic worldview. I'm also going to kind of pit this. I'm going to try to keep my own personal opinion out of this class, and I'm going to be pitting scientific creationism versus Darwinian evolution, and you will see how they look at the same data, but they interpret it completely differently. So that's where we're going with week 1. I hope you enjoy it, and I'll see you again for week 2.